Hey everyone, this is the Black Manga Critic here with another review for the channel. And basically this is going to be a weekly Shonen Jump Thursdays review of the Promised Neverland Chapter 51. Now, if you're new to the channel, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell button when you do. Follow me on Twitter and like the page on Facebook. So basically I want to talk about two things related to this chapter. The first thing I want to talk about is how the chapter was sort of split into three parts. And how that really shows how much Shirai and Posuka are great at pacing. And then the second thing that I want to talk about is just the ending, in terms of, William Minerva or someone that might be William Minerva and what sort of information we got from that, even just from like that last panel, right? So the first thing, right, that I want to talk about is just how great the pacing is for this manga. One thing that I keep consistently sort of telling people is that this manga is coming for a pillar spot, right? And when I say a pillar spot, I mean like one of those sort of like top 3 manga of Shonen Jump kind of things where it's like, at one point it was like Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece. And what's going to be coming is, right, like One Piece isn't going to lose its spot for, until it's done, right? But when it does come to the other 2 spots, those other 2 spots are going to go to Boku no Hero Academia and the Promised Neverland. Black Clover might have a spot before the Promised Neverland gets a spot because Black Clover is getting an anime adaptation before the Promised Neverland. But bet your ass that the Promised Neverland is getting a anime adaptation at some point, maybe next year or something like that. Or the announcement will come next year. And then that's when shit's going to go fucking crazy. Everybody's going to be coming to Comic-Con and Anime Expo and all those cons dressed in fucking white pajamas. Like, that's what's going to happen. So I'm calling it now. But back to the chapter, right? If we're talking about the first thing, and we're talking about the fact that, right, the pacing is very well done for this manga and for this manga chapter, we get so much just from, like, one chapter, right? We get 3 things, right? The first thing is that Sungju is a badass, right? This is, like, not particularly disputable because, like, badasses sort of have to, like, be able to do battle in a battle shonen well, right? They have to be extremely capable. And 2, they have to have some sort of like, sort of moral code, thought processes, ideologies, whatever you want to call it, things that like make us sort of believe that like these people are characters, that they are sort of, sentient beings, and that they matter to the story, right? If you're so Sungju matters to the story, right? Like at this point, right? He is a character that can like slaughter like these minion demons and a leader of these minion demons fairly easily, right? Like he doesn't look like it doesn't look like he was particularly injured or anything like that. We don't know, but you kind of get the sense that like the way that Posuka set up the panels, right, and like drew the panels, that it was like a bloodbath. It was like a slaughter. And I think that like we get a lot of like that out of that, right? The fact that like Sungju is someone that like you don't want to fuck with, and I think eventually like the kids might have to like sort of come at him. They might have to fuck with him, but now we know that like if the kids do have to deal with him, it might be particularly difficult because he is very prodigious as a fighter, right? As a character that does battle. So I appreciated that we got that, right? And we also got a little bit about the fact that like he views other demons as sort of like, not so good or interesting or worthy or whatever because he calls them pests. So they're kind of like roaches to him, right? And a lot of that probably has to do with his religious sort of dogma and ideology and things of that nature, right? So I think that like, somewhere down the line we're going to get a bit more of that because like he probably believes that like these demons are just eating whoever they want, and that's not right. Because like you're only supposed to be eating particular humans, so he sort of views them as like lesser than. I think that's interesting. I think all right. So what would we get, like 4, maybe 5 pages, and we got a lot more about who Sungju is as like as a demon that has his own particular set of ideology and religious dogma and stuff like that. So I appreciated that. The second thing that we want to get into, right, is like at least the second part of the first thing that I want to talk about, right, is the second part of this chapter, which is, Ray and Emma and the kids, kind of, looking around, trying to figure out why they can't find the sort of safe haven that they've been looking for, right? So when we get, like, the one thing that I love is that, like, again, the pacing is very good. We don't spend too much time in this, like, desert wasteland looking for the shelter. That only lasts maybe like a third of the chapter, right? So Emma and Ray are looking around, and I think it's great because, like, we get more sort of development, right? Like, Ray is very much so a person that doesn't usually panic unless, like, unless he thinks that he's like clearly lost or is about to die or something like that, and even then, not necessarily. So, you know, I think we get a good amount of character development for Ray because he's just like, okay, like, kids, like, are you done now? Can we, like, you know, get to figuring this thing out? Can you calm down? And I think we get a lot of that, and that's good because, like, you know, Emma is also sort of like, okay, like, what's going on? And so you, like I said, like, Emma has like a sort of crazy range of emotional states, and Ray's range isn't like that as large, but I think that helps Ray because Ray needs to be an individual who can sort of stay calm, calmly analyze the situation and figure something out from staying by staying calm. So, right, not only does he stay calm, but he calms the kids down. He, like, by letting them be kids, right? One thing that I think that is great about this particular instance is that, and other instances, right, during the sort of escape part of arc, right, is that we get Ray sort of growing as a character, sort of like really becoming like a caretaker in a sense. He's just like, now, kids, calm down. And, like, I like that. I like the fact that we get that from this chapter. And it doesn't take very long to, like, develop that a little bit, right? Some manga, they'll take, like, a whole arc to develop one particular trait for a character. And The Promised Neverland does that in, like, a chapter. You know what I mean? Like, the pacing is great for this battle shonen. So, sort of going back into, like, the second part, we also get to, like, the kids. The kids just get to be kids. I appreciate that. I want to see, like, kids act as kids. I gotta, like, you know, like, sometimes, like, you know, Hunter x Hunter, like, is very good in some ways because, like, you know, like, right, like, they're a little bit older, right? Like, Gon is, like, you know, 12 going on 14, and Killua 12 going on 14, and they are kids, but they're also, like, Killua is, like, a bit more of an adult than some of the other adults, and, like, so, like, stuff like that is kind of, like, it sort of throws me off, right? But, like, The Promised Neverland is, like, these kids are fucking kids. Like, they are children, right? Even when they're, like, they're very smart, and that's because they've taken tests and stuff like that. But in this instance, they are only as adult as their actions towards sort of going towards sort of freedom, right? Every other sort of time, they're very much so children. At least, and I'm talking about, like, the children, you know what I mean? Like, the children are just fucking kids. They just, you know, they're crying, they're freaking out, they feel, like, slighted. And that's how kids are. Like, if you ever, like, you know, babysat for children or had, like, little brothers or sisters and stuff like that, like, kids are very much so just like, man, what the hell? You said you were going to do this thing and you didn't do this thing. And that's it. Like, they're not thinking about any other sort of moral complexities or sort of like a deeper level of, like, injustice or stuff like that. They're just like, you said you were going to do this thing and you didn't do this thing. So now I'm upset and now I'm going to yell. And, like, that's what the kids do, right, in this chapter. And I appreciate that. So again, Shirai and Posuka, right? Like, because Posuka draws us very well. And, like, you know, there's, like, it's like, hey, what's going on, man? You're a liar. Like, they look like children, like, complaining. And I appreciated that aesthetic. And Shirai, you know, wrote that scene, not necessarily brilliantly, but, you know, it was a great scene. I appreciated it. So, going into so eventually we get into the third part. That doesn't last very long because clearly Ray's already sort of, you know, figured out a couple of things, and, like, they've tried to figure out more things when they were at the Grace Fieldhouse. But we do know that Ray's figured out how to get to B0632. So we move on to that fairly quickly. Again, the pacing is great. And so when we do move into the third thing, again, very, very, like, brisk pace, right? We get a little bit about what the shelter looks like. And even from that little bit, we get the sense that, hey, maybe there were other people already here, or people haven't reached there yet, and this guy's just been sitting in the shelter by himself for a while, right? Eating cookies and drinking tea. But basically, the third part moves relatively fast. We get a bit of information that we need before we get into the next chapter, and the most important information that we get is this guy who might be William Minerva. So, to get into the second part that I wanted to talk about, right, William Minerva, or the guy who might be William Minerva, right, we get a little bit about who he is, right? We know that, like, you know, he's clearly this guy can like use technology and like maybe surveillance equipment and stuff like that, tracing equipment, right? And the fact that like he might be a refined kind of like English gentlemanly kind of like character, just based on the fact that like he's, you know, drinking the tea and like eating the biscuits and like or cookies, as like call them in America, right? Like he's eating the cookies, and it's like, okay, this guy is like interesting. I want to know more about him. I want to see what his personality is going to be like when he interacts with the children, and I think that's going to be very interesting moving forward, because like that's the whole point. Like the Promised Neverland has been fantastic when it comes to character interaction. I said this in another video, but like, you know, right, like one of the things that's great about Emma is the fact that she develops as she interacts with other characters, right? And you need that. All manga, all stories that have characters need, if you're gonna have character development, you need character interaction. Like otherwise, nothing happens, right? They don't necessarily grow in the way that they should for a particular story. So here, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this guy interacts with Emma and Ray and other characters. Something tells me that like Emma and him might not jive like very well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that interaction. I think him and Ray might do particularly well, like more or less, because Ray is like a cool, calm kind of cucumber, so he'll probably be fine. But Emma's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing that interaction. So that's basically all I wanted to say about the chapter. Outside of like, oh, I also wanted to say that Posuka drew like this guy like brilliantly. Like he looks kind of like a rebel. Right? Like he looks like, if any of you ever have sort of read anything like about like, you know, just like radical politics and stuff like that, or radical like ideologies and stuff like that, like he looks like a guy that would like have like a radical ideology. Because a lot of the times what happens is when you meet individuals that have radical ideologies, they always kind of dress in an oddly sort of traditional kind of way, or a way that like is deemed to not be traditional by other individuals, but is very much so traditional. So like, right, like they always have certain signs. Like I like to think of like hipsters as like individuals that kind of like do that. You know, there's certain things that they try to do, but like all in all, there are things that are very much so like traditional, like in the way that they're sort of dressed or act or things like that. And this guy's sort of like tea and like crumpet sort of thing is very like so much of a traditional thing. It's interesting. So that sort of juxtaposition of sort of like the radical sort of ideology and the sort of radical politics that is trying to change this world. You're right, like and the sort of tea and crumpets and the old school kind of like you know, Victorian sort of even early modern and like sort of English modernity sort of like vibe is interesting, right? Like I think that's great, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the character interactions are going to go with this guy who might be William Minerva and who might not be, and the children, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing those interactions. So yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say about the chapter, definitely. And I'm just going to sign out. Again, The Promised Neverland is an amazing, amazing manga. It's coming. It's coming for that spot that Bleach had. I'm telling y'all. Maybe Black Clover might already have that spot right now, but The Promised Neverland is going to snatch it. It's going to snatch that spot. I'm telling you, it's coming. So be on the lookout for that. Anybody who hasn't read The Promised Neverland, or you have friends that haven't read it, or YouTubers that haven't read it, you need to tell them to read it. I'm going to try to like, you know, say like, hey, like, you know, other YouTubers who haven't started doing reviews on The Promised Neverland, start doing reviews on The Promised Neverland. I want to see that. I want to see more YouTubers do that. So I'm going to try to like, you know, get people on Twitter to be like, hey, like follow this thing, hype it up, you know, get it some notoriety. So this is the Black Manga Critic with a review of The Promised Neverland Chapter 52, and I'm out.